My heart just skipped a beat, then another. Then it forgot how counting works entirely. I can't feel my fingers. I stopped being able to feel my fingers about 4 minutes ago, which, in hindsight, was the least of my problems. My chest is doing this thing where it feels like someone is standing on it. Not punching, standing, patiently, like they've got all day. My last clear thought was, the water looks so calm from up here. My second to last clear thought was, that's interesting, I'm not shivering anymore. That second one should have scared me more than it did. It didn't because by that point my brain had already started making some genuinely questionable executive decisions. Decisions we're going to talk about at length because they are, professionally speaking, some of the best plot twists the human nervous system has ever written. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up here. Oh, hey there. Sorry, should have led with that. I'm dead, by the way. Have been for a while. Time gets weird once you're not using a body to measure it, but I've had what feels like an unreasonably long stretch of eternity to sit around and watch you people live inside these things, these bodies, without having the faintest idea what they're actually doing on your behalf, minute to keep you alive. I watch you eat, sleep, panic, overheat, freeze, ignore your chest pain, Google your symptoms instead of calling anyone, and somehow, most of the time, survive anyway. It's genuinely one of the better shows in the universe. No commercials, terrible reruns. I died cold. We'll get to the specifics. What matters right now is that dying cold gave me a front row seat to one of the strangest, most elegant, most quietly brutal systems your body runs. The one that decides, in real time, which parts of you are allowed to live if it comes down to a choice. And it does come down to a choice. That's the part nobody tells you. So let's start where it actually starts. Not with me, with the cold itself. Here's a scenario drop for you, because I think you'll understand this faster if you're standing in it instead of reading about it. You fall through ice, or you go overboard, or you just badly misjudge a mountain lake in June because it looked fine. Doesn't matter how you got there. What matters is what your body does in the next 90 seconds, because those 90 seconds are, weirdly, more dangerous than everything that comes after. The instant cold water hits your skin, your body does something called the cold shock response, and it is not subtle. You gasp, involuntarily, immediately, whether you want to or not, because cold receptors in your skin fire a reflex straight to your brainstem that overrides your conscious control of breathing. This is known, extensively documented in cold water immersion research. That involuntary gasp reflex is the single biggest killer in cold water drownings, not hypothermia. If your face happens to be underwater when that gasp fires, you inhale water instead of air. People die in the first minute of cold water immersion, fit, strong swimmers, sometimes only a few meters from a boat, because their own brainstem made a decision on their behalf before their conscious mind got a vote. Your heart rate and blood pressure spike at the same time, not gradually, instantly. Cold water immersion can send your heart rate rocketing and your blood pressure surging within seconds, which is exactly the kind of double stress, a strained heart and constricting blood vessels, that has been documented triggering fatal arrhythmias, particularly in people with underlying cardiac issues they didn't know they had. This is one of the leading, known explanations for why some people die of sudden cardiac events within the first minute of jumping into cold water, long before hypothermia could possibly be the cause. Your pancreas deserves overtime most days of your life. Your heart deserves it specifically during the first 90 seconds of an ice bath it did not agree to. And here's the part that surprises almost everybody. Hyperventilation follows the gasp. Your breathing rate can roughly quadruple uncontrollably, and it will keep doing that for several minutes regardless of how hard you try to calm down. This matters enormously if you're trying to actually swim to safety, because you cannot coordinate breath with stroke when your respiratory system has functionally seized control of itself. Cold water drowning statistics consistently show this pattern. People capable of swimming much farther than the distance that killed them, undone not by weakness, but by a breathing reflex they had zero say in. Which brings us to something stranger. Your body is running two completely separate emergency programs at once here, and they don't coordinate with each other at all. One program is trying to keep your airway safe. The other is trying to keep your blood pressure from collapsing. Neither one is checking in with the other, or with you. Evolution built you a house with some very competent, very uncommunicative emergency responders who've never once had a team meeting. Here's where biology cheats, and I mean that with genuine admiration. Your body was never evolved to survive falling through ice specifically. There was no evolutionary pressure that said, let's build a subsystem for accidental February lake incidents. What your body was built for over an extraordinarily long stretch of mammalian history was surviving occasional, brief, dangerous cold, a river crossing, a storm, a fall into snowmelt, where the priority was never comfort. Comfort was never on the table. Survival of the core at almost any cost to everything else was the entire design brief. This is where you meet peripheral vasoconstriction, which is going to come up roughly 40 more times in this script because it is, without exaggeration, the single most important process happening in your body right now if you're cold. Blood vessels in your skin, hands, feet, and ears clamp down hard, redirecting blood flow away from your extremities and towards your core, where your heart, lungs, liver, and brain live. This is known, well-documented, reflex controlled largely by your sympathetic nervous system responding to signals from cold receptors and from your hypothalamus, which is functioning here as your body's thermostat, constantly comparing your actual core temperature against the temperature it's decided you should be.
Think of your circulatory system for a second as a city during a blackout. There's only so much power. The hospital keeps its lights on, the suburbs go dark. Nobody voted on this. It's triage, and it happens automatically. And your fingers are the suburbs. This is also why your extremities get cold so much faster than your torso. It's not because they're smaller and lose heat faster, although that's true too. It's because your body is actively rerouting blood away from them on purpose, sacrificing your hands to protect your heart. Your fingers aren't failing. They're being sacrificed. There's a difference, and it's an important one, because it means the numbness you feel isn't your body breaking down. It's your body making a very deliberate, very old decision about what matters more. Fast fact: newborn babies and some adults have a special tissue called brown adipose tissue, brown fat, which, unlike regular white fat, is packed with mitochondria whose entire job is generating heat directly, without shivering, by essentially short-circuiting normal energy production. This is known and has been directly measured with imaging studies. Adults have much less of it than infants, but recent research has confirmed that a meaningful amount persists in many adults, particularly around the neck and upper chest, and that regular cold exposure can increase its activity over time. Your baby self was a significantly more efficient furnace than your current self. Something to think about. Which brings us to shivering, something you've experienced approximately 1,000 times and have almost certainly never once thought about mechanically. Shivering is rapid, involuntary contraction and relaxation of your skeletal muscles, and it is, essentially, your body deliberately generating friction and metabolic heat as a side effect of movement it doesn't actually want you to make. It can boost your metabolic heat production several times over baseline, a genuinely significant increase, known and measurable, though the exact multiplier varies by person and by how cold adapted you are. Your hypothalamus is running the whole operation, comparing your blood temperature moment to moment and deciding, essentially, we are behind schedule on warmth, initiate large-scale controlled muscle chaos. Here's the twist almost nobody knows. Shivering is expensive, and your body is fully aware of that. It burns through glucose and eventually into fat stores at a rate that can leave you noticeably drained after a long bout of shivering, which is why prolonged cold exposure leaves people not just cold, but genuinely deeply exhausted, in a way that has nothing to do with how much they physically moved. You can shiver yourself into fatigue standing perfectly still. Evolution looked at burn a significant chunk of the day's energy budget just to stay slightly warmer and somehow approved it, because the alternative, not shivering, was worse often enough that the trade-off made sense. And there's a genuinely strange detail buried in here. Shivering is inefficient on purpose. Muscle contraction that's actually coordinated and useful, like walking, converts a good chunk of its energy into mechanical work, moving you somewhere. Shivering deliberately does the opposite. It's structured to be mechanically useless and thermally wasteful in the good way, converting almost all of that energy straight into heat instead of movement. Your body engineered a form of exercise specifically designed to accomplish nothing except getting warm, which, honestly, some of you have also tried to do at the gym. Let's slow down and walk through this properly, because the way your body degrades under sustained cold exposure follows a genuinely predictable sequence, and knowing it is the difference between recognizing a real emergency and thinking someone's just being a little dramatic about the cold. Mild hypothermia. Core temperature roughly 35 to 32 degrees Celsius, about 95 to 90 Fahrenheit. This stage is known and well documented clinically. You shiver intensely, often uncontrollably. Your hands lose fine motor coordination first. This is why people in early hypothermia can struggle to work a zipper or dial a phone long before anything looks seriously wrong. Your speech may slur slightly. Judgment is already subtly, quietly compromised, which is one of the more dangerous features of this entire condition. The exact organ you need to recognize you're in trouble is one of the first things affected. Moderate hypothermia, roughly 32 to 28 degrees Celsius, 90 to 82 Fahrenheit, shivering strangely starts to fade or stop entirely. This is not a sign of improvement. It is one of the worst signs there is, because it typically means your body's glucose reserves for fueling that muscle activity is running critically low, or your thermoregulatory center itself is becoming too impaired to keep coordinating it. Confusion deepens substantially. Some people become combative or irrationally uncooperative with rescuers, a documented, known clinical pattern that has genuinely gotten hypothermic people killed because they fought the very people trying to save them, convinced, in their impaired state, that something was wrong with the rescue rather than with their own brain. Severe hypothermia, below roughly 28 degrees Celsius, 82 Fahrenheit, consciousness fades, pupils may become sluggish. Your heart, by this stage, is dangerously prone to a specific, lethal kind of electrical chaos, ventricular fibrillation, which can be triggered by something as small as sudden movement or rough handling, which is precisely why rescue protocols for severely hypothermic patients emphasize keeping them as still and horizontal as humanly possible. Below a certain core temperature, your heart can simply stop generating a coordinated rhythm at all. And here's the detail that should genuinely unsettle you in the fun way. Severely hypothermic patients can appear clinically dead, no detectable pulse, no measurable breathing, fixed pupils, and still be resuscitated, sometimes hours later, with intact brain function. This has led to a phrase used in actual emergency medicine literature: nobody is dead until they're warm and dead. It's known, documented in real case reports, including patients recovered from cardiac arrest after extreme cold exposure who went on to make full neurological recoveries. Cold, it turns out, doesn't just endanger your brain. Under the right circumstances, it can also be the thing that protects it.
Okay, now for my personal favorite plot twists, and also coincidentally the part of the story where things went badly for me specifically. In a meaningful fraction of severe hypothermia deaths, investigators find the person partially or fully undressed despite dying of cold. This phenomenon is genuinely known and documented across many case reports. Cold weather search and rescue teams and forensic literature both describe it, though the precise mechanism is still debated, sitting somewhere between likely and hypothesized rather than fully settled. The leading explanation involves that same peripheral vasoconstriction we talked about earlier finally failing. As your body's thermoregulatory control breaks down in late-stage hypothermia, the muscles controlling those clamped-down blood vessels in your skin can lose their grip, sometimes suddenly, and blood rushes back out to your extremities and skin all at once. Your skin, which has been ice-cold this entire time, suddenly floods with slightly warmer core blood, and your confused, oxygen-starved brain interprets that sudden warm sensation as "I am overheating," not "less cold." Overheating. Your dying brain's last coherent instruction to you can genuinely be, take your coat off, you're way too hot. There's a second, related hypothesized mechanism involving confusion and disorientation from the cold, directly impairing judgment enough that some people simply start undressing out of pure delirium, independent of any warmth sensation at all. Burrowing behavior, sometimes called terminal burrowing, where severely hypothermic individuals are found having crawled into small, confined spaces like under furniture or into closets, a behavior some researchers suspect echoes an ancient, deeply buried instinct related to shelter seeking, though this remains genuinely hypothesized rather than confirmed. Either way, and I want to be very clear about this because it was, personally, extremely relevant to my own final 10 minutes, your brain, at the exact moment you need it most, can produce a completely convincing, completely wrong sensory experience and hand it to you with full confidence. There was no version of events where I doubted that I was overheating. I was sure of it. I remember being sure of it. That's the terrifying part. It didn't feel like confusion from the inside. It felt like certainty. Your brain is basically an unpaid intern running the most complicated machine in the known universe, and on this particular day, that intern looked at all the sensor data, panicked slightly, and just made something up. Let's clear a few things up, because some of what people believe about cold exposure is not just wrong, it's actively dangerous. Myth 1. Alcohol warms you up in the cold. Reality? It does the exact opposite. Why it's false? Alcohol causes peripheral vasodilation, widening the very blood vessels your body just spent precious energy constricting to protect your core. You'll feel warmer because warm blood is now flooding back into your skin, but you are actually losing heat to the environment faster than before and accelerating your slide toward hypothermia. This is known, well-documented physiology, and it's a major contributing factor in a significant number of cold weather deaths, particularly among intoxicated people who fall asleep outdoors in winter, convinced they're comfortably warm right up until they aren't. Myth 2. You lose most of your body heat through your head. Reality? This one's mostly false, and it traces back to old, flawed military research from decades ago that tested subjects wearing full body coverage except an exposed head, which obviously made the head look like a disproportionate heat loss zone. Why it's false? Heat loss is roughly proportional to how much skin surface is exposed, not to some special property of your scalp. Your head loses heat at roughly the same rate per square inch as any other uncovered skin. Cover your hands and neck and you'll notice the difference just as much. Myth 3. Shivering means you're in real danger. Mostly false, and actually somewhat backwards. Why it's false? Shivering is your body successfully fighting to maintain core temperature. It's mild to moderate hypothermia's noisy, uncomfortable, but functioning defense mechanism. The genuinely dangerous moment, as we covered a minute ago, is when shivering stops despite continued cold exposure. That's the sign your body's furnace is running out of fuel, not the sign it never needed one. Myth 4. You can't get hypothermia in mild weather, only in extreme cold. Reality? False, and this one has killed a surprising number of experienced outdoor recreationists. Why it's false? Hypothermia cases are frequently documented in air temperatures well below freezing, particularly involving wet clothing and wind, because wet skin loses heat to evaporation and conduction dramatically faster than dry skin does in still air. A wet, windy 10 degrees Celsius day can be more dangerous than a dry, still, -10 day. The extreme cold framing in people's heads is exactly the kind of comfortable myth that gets underprepared hikers into real trouble. Let's ground this in actual numbers, because I promised you honesty over drama, and drama's easy. Studies of cold water immersion incidents have consistently found that a significant share of deaths occur within the first few minutes, not from hypothermia at all, but from that cold shock gasp reflex and the accompanying cardiac strain we covered in Part 1. Picture a crowded subway platform at rush hour. That's roughly the scale of a lot of people, and a meaningful chunk of that platform's worth of cold water deaths, historically, happens before hypothermia even becomes physiologically relevant. The Titanic disaster remains one of the most cited historical cases in cold water survival research, precisely because the water that night was documented at close to freezing, and most victims in the water died within roughly an hour or two, primarily from the combination of cold shock, cardiac strain, and progressing hypothermia, not, as popular imagination often assumes, purely from freezing solid, which isn't how human death from cold actually works. On the flip side, therapeutic hypothermia, deliberately cooling patients, usually to somewhere around 32 to 34 degrees Celsius, is now a genuinely established medical intervention used after certain cardiac arrests and some newborn brain injuries, specifically because controlled cooling has been shown in real clinical trials to reduce the metabolic demand of brain tissue and improve neurological outcomes.
Picture the difference between a phone running a heavy app at full brightness versus low power mode. That's roughly the logic. Slow the system down deliberately, and it needs less oxygen to survive the emergency. This is known, backed by controlled clinical research, and it's a genuinely elegant example of doctors taking something that kills people accidentally and weaponizing it carefully, on purpose, to save them instead. Here's the part of the story that saves people. Sometimes, in exactly the situations that should kill them fastest. Young children who fall through ice into extremely cold water occasionally survive submersions of 10, 20, even upwards of 30 minutes with intact neurological outcomes, timeframes that would be catastrophic for an adult in warmer water. This is known, documented in real emergency medicine case reports, and the leading explanation involves something called the mammalian dive reflex, a set of reactions triggered specifically by cold water contacting the face, which slows heart rate dramatically, further constricts peripheral blood vessels to protect the core and brain, and redirects the body's remaining oxygen almost entirely toward the heart and brain. This reflex exists evolutionarily across a huge range of diving mammals, seals, whales, dolphins, where it's a core survival tool for extended underwater dives. And humans, land mammals that we mostly are, still carry a weaker but genuinely functional version of it, apparently left over from deep in our shared evolutionary past. It tends to be notably stronger in young children, which is likely related to differences in body proportion, metabolic rate, and possibly the developmental persistence of reflexes that fade with age, though the exact reasons children's dive reflex responses are often more pronounced remain an ongoing, not fully settled research. Your immune system occasionally starts office drama with completely innocent pollen. Your dive reflex, meanwhile, is the one coworker who actually shows up during the actual emergency and does the job correctly, even though nobody remembers hiring them. Let's go back to that vasoconstriction we've been circling all script, because it's time to talk about the bill that eventually comes due. Prolonged, severe vasoconstriction in your extremities, the exact mechanism keeping your core alive, starves the tissue in your fingers, toes, ears, and nose of oxygen and nutrients for an extended stretch. If this continues long enough, ice crystals begin forming directly within and between your cells, which is frostbite, a known, direct physical injury where those crystals physically rupture cell membranes and where the subsequent restriction of blood flow can cause tissue death even after rewarming, sometimes leading to amputation in severe documented cases. This is genuinely one of the clearest examples in the entire human body of a deliberate biological trade-off rather than a design flaw. Your body isn't malfunctioning when frostbite happens. It's executing a triage decision made by systems far older than conscious thought. The core, heart, lungs, brain, gets protected at almost any cost, and your fingers are quite literally expendable collateral in that negotiation. Evolution never optimized for keep all 10 fingers. Evolution optimized for keep the brain that's currently making all these decisions alive long enough to pass on genes. Your fingers were never really part of the deal. Fast fact, rewarming too quickly or in the wrong way carries a genuine, known risk called afterdrop, where cold, oxygen-depleted, more acidic blood trapped in your constricted extremities suddenly rushes back to your core once those vessels relax, temporarily dropping your core temperature further and sometimes triggering dangerous heart rhythm disturbances, right in the middle of what looks like a rescue succeeding. This is a major reason emergency protocols for hypothermic patients emphasize gentle, gradual, core-first rewarming, rather than throwing someone straight into a hot shower, which can genuinely make things worse in a severely hypothermic person. You're the one in the water now. It's been about 11 minutes. Your shivering stopped a while ago, and it felt, honestly, like relief, like your body had finally settled down. That's not relief. You already know that because you were paying attention a few sections ago. That's your fuel running out. Your fingers stopped being fingers functionally about 6 minutes back. You can see them, you just can't operate them, the way you might look at someone else's hands and know abstractly that they exist. Your thinking has gone soft around the edges, thoughts arriving slightly late, slightly out of order, like a video call with bad lag. And then, very suddenly, you feel warm, genuinely warm, almost pleasant. Your brain, right on schedule, hands you the single most convincing lie it has ever told you, with total sincerity at the worst possible moment. This is the point in the story that I'd very much like to tell you I made a different decision than I actually made. I did not. I believed it completely. I want you to understand that just stay calm and think clearly is not always available to you, biologically, once your core temperature drops far enough. And that's not a failure of willpower. It's a hardware problem, not a software problem, and no amount of grit fixes hardware.
All right, confession time. Since I've apparently got nothing left to lose, being, again, extremely dead. 1. Cotton is a genuinely terrible fabric to be wet and cooled in because it holds moisture against your skin and loses almost all of its insulating value once soaked. I want you to know that I owned actual technical outdoor gear that day, sitting in a closet, and wore a cotton hoodie instead because it was more comfortable getting into the boat. Evolution gave your body an extraordinary defense system. It did not give you the sense to dress correctly. That part's on you. 2. Shivering stopping is not your body calming down. If you or someone with you stops shivering in a cold exposure situation and starts acting confused, get warm immediately and get help. Don't wait for it to look more dramatic, because by the time it looks dramatic, judgment may already be too compromised to act on it. 3. If you ever feel suddenly, suspiciously warm in a genuinely cold situation, treat that feeling as a red flag, not good news. Your brain lies. I promise you it does. I am personally extremely qualified to confirm this. 4. Wind and wet clothing kill in weather that doesn't sound that cold. Respect a rainy 8-degree day the way you'd respect a dry -15 day. Both can genuinely get you. 5. If you're ever pulling someone out of cold water or off a cold trail, handle them gently and keep them horizontal if you can. Rough movement in a severely hypothermic person is a documented trigger for fatal heart rhythm problems. Careful beats fast here, almost every time. 6. Alcohol before or during cold exposure is one of the more efficient ways to speed up your own decline, no matter how warm it makes you feel in the moment. It's lying to you, too. Cold and alcohol, as a team, tell a remarkably consistent set of lies. I've watched this exact sequence happen to more people than I can count, across more decades than I can count, and it still gets me every single time. Not because it's rare, but because it's so consistently structurally the same story. Someone underestimates the water or the weather or their own body's honesty, and their own nervous system, doing exactly what it was built to do, quietly writes the ending for them before they even realize the story started. But here's the thing I actually want to leave you with, because I promised you this wouldn't turn into a lecture, and I meant it. Everything that happened to me, the gasp, the vasoconstriction, the shivering, the false warmth, all of it, is not your body failing you. It's your body running an extraordinarily old, extraordinarily well-tested triage program with a level of coordination that would be genuinely miraculous if it weren't happening inside literally every person on Earth all the time, mostly without anyone ever noticing. It sacrificed my fingers to protect my heart. It slowed my brain to protect my brain. It even had a backup plan, the dive reflex, that saves children in situations that would kill adults outright. This system is not broken. This system is spectacular. It just occasionally runs face first into a situation or a decision it wasn't quite fast enough to outnegotiate. You get to walk away from this with something I didn't have: the information. Dress for the weather you're actually in, not the weather you're hoping for. Take shivering seriously, and take its absence more seriously. Don't trust sudden warmth in the cold. And maybe, every once in a while, appreciate the fact that your circulatory system is currently making triage decisions on your behalf that you will never consciously notice, because they're working. I didn't get to appreciate mine until it was too late to do anything but watch. You still can. If you want more videos like this, subscribe.